Okay, we're going ahead and get started into this Clinkz replay analysis. So this game you picked Clinkz into everyone except Shadowfiend, which I think is fine. Clinkz does pretty well versus Pudge, versus Jug, versus Snapfire. There's a little bit of some anti-synergy versus the Slardar just because of his ult, but I really don't think that that is such a big issue, particularly because if you get on top of the Slardar, like if you're able to go on him with your Orchid or something, then he's just going to die. And good players should have dust and sentries and stuff already, so the Slardar ult really just isn't going to affect you that much, as long as you're playing around it to some extent, right? One thing that you should know going into the Shadowfiend matchup, so when you see this pick, you should start thinking about your itemization and stuff. Itemization for mids is generally the same, so let me just hop into this demo real quick. So for the most part, mids are going to get items that look like this: a Fairy Fire, an Iron Branch, 2 of whatever their like 3 stat item is, Slipper, Mantle, or Gauntlet, I think, and then a Circlet. And they will get 2 shared tangos from one of their supports. Excuse me. Sometimes you'll get a ward, sometimes you won't. It really depends on the matchup. I find that if you're not at risk of getting ganked and you don't need the runes, like you're not a bottle hero, then you don't need the ward, and it's usually used elsewhere. And there's actually some arguments to say that it's actually hinders you because of the way the aggro works, but we'll talk about that when we get into the game. So let's go into this replay, and I've watched this once already, so hopefully my thoughts are a little bit more condensed and organized. Versus Shadowfiend and other mids that spend a lot of spells, generally it's a good idea to get a stick early. So you go ahead and you kind of alter the starting item build and you go with a salve instead of an additional slipper, which I think is a mistake. You should buy a salve, but you shouldn't start with it. And we'll actually look at how long it takes you for you to use this salve. And I think the 3 damage that you would have gotten from every single auto would serve you 10 times better than how this salve ended up serving you. Another thing to consider versus Shadowfiend is better Shadowfiend players will start with raises. And so getting a stick really early can give you some of the sustain through the nukes that he has. This guy ends up starting with Necromastery, which you should know as soon as you get to the lane, because you should click on him. And ward mentality. Okay, so ward mentality is if you're going to place a ward, you need to place it ASAP, and you need to place it in a way where they don't know that you place a ward. So there's a little trick. You may be familiar with this, you may not be. So if you run into these trees and place this ward like here from the fog of these trees, the enemy mid can go and stand in these trees. Sorry, that's from the other side. So if he places a ward here, if he places a ward, you know, somewhere in this area from the fog of these trees, you can walk up and check to see if he has a ward here. And you can do that at any point in the laning phase. So that's something that I see most dire mids doing in my pubs, which is they run and they check right here. And so what has kind of happened is the Radiant mid players have either started warding the top and they walk up here and they ward, you know, in this area, or they wait until they wait to place this ward because they can do so from fog. So I think you should have been able to see him place this ward with the way that he walked. We'll back up here. And I'm watching the mini map here. Okay, so you couldn't see him, which is fine. And that's how it should be. Like he should not place that ward in a way where you could have seen it afterward. In terms of blocking and rune control, I tend to say that if you're going to go for a rune as a mid, it's better to do it as Radiant because of the way that the creeps come out of the base. So if we back up here just a second, I know I'm backing up a lot. Just 30 seconds now. Okay, so let's watch the way that these creeps spawn here. Okay, so if you notice every single time, and this is completely consistent, there's what's called an Arteezy block that you can go and Google how to do, but it's pretty inconsistent. But for the most part, the Radiant creeps are always going to do this. Well, they always will unless you do the RTZ block. And they will split around this tower, and what will happen is you can't actually block these creeps until about a little bit past where they are right now. Whereas on Dire side, the creeps spawn, and immediately, like just at the bottom of these stairs, you can start blocking them the whole way. So you get this creep block advantage from the bottom of the stairs to about here on Dire, which means that you should always have, if you're Dire, unless you mess up the block, which if you do, that's fine, that's life, you make mistakes. But you should always generally have a block advantage, and I would advise not going for this rune unless there's a serious threat of somebody stealing it, because the block is just too important, particularly versus heroes who are very, very first wave thirsty. Clinkz is not so first wave thirsty, so if you don't get a great block on Clinkz, it's not that big of a deal. If Shadow Fiend doesn't get a good block, then it's a really big deal. And so just because it matters a lot to him, it matters a lot to you, even though, like, for your own game, it's not a huge deal because you're not super dependent on the first levels of CS, or the first waves of CS and levels. But Shadow Fiend really is. He's very snowbally in the mid lane. He wants to get level 3 fast. He wants to get his souls up, or raises up. Now, he starts with Necromastery, and this is just a replay bug that he has 2 souls, because he doesn't. And I have already watched your player perspective, so I know that you don't click on him to see what he has, but that's something that you should do. So you should be clicking on him at some point in this like first little bit to see what he has, and you should generally click on every single mid player, but particularly versus heroes that have varying builds that have some way of telling, like Shadow Fiend has a little buff that pops up telling you how many souls he has, and you should know he has souls, and you should adjust your play. So here, if I'm playing Clinkz versus this Shadow Fiend, I'm already standing on top of his stairs. Like, you're standing on top of your stairs for who knows what reason. And I'm standing on his stairs right here. Like, right freaking here. And I'm clicking him over and over with my W. And I'm doing that because I don't draw aggro. You don't draw aggro when you orb attack. So, orb attacking is when you manually click your orb. This is an orb attack. Onto the enemy hero. So Odie can do it, Silencer can do it, Viper can do it, Clinkz can do it. I don't know if there's anyone else. Huskar can do it as well. And it makes these heroes like extremely obnoxious in the laning phase when you're adept at doing this. So you go to pull aggro, which you kind of mess up a little bit, and that's okay. Like, again, that's just life. So pulling aggro I think is fine, and then you want to be on these stairs and you want to be hitting them. Like, you want creeps to be here hitting this range creep, and you want to be hitting them saying, you can't go for this range creep. Which is why good Shadow Fiend players would get raises level 1, because then they could still get the CS of the range creep, even though they wouldn't get the soul. They'd rather have the CS than the soul. So he's able to be greedy here, and you don't punish him for it. But like, this guy could literally be half health already, and you could just be clicking him. Now, you do get the range creep deny, which is good. You do good at pump faking him for the CS. Like, for the most part, having watched this already, like, you're pretty decent at CSing. I'm not going to say you're exceptional. Like, Shadow Fiend has a damage advantage on you already. He shouldn't be able to deny you out because of your W, so you shouldn't get denied out. But in terms of, like, being able to deny him, that's less likely to happen, particularly with the build that you have set up here. So you guys see us for a bit, and for the most part, if we watch this lane really quick, and this is your player perspective, by the way, for the most part, you just kind of let him lane, and he kind of lets you lane. And any time that you're laning, you want to think about who benefits from being passive the most. So some extreme examples are like Anti-Mage, Medusa, Terrorblade. Like, they benefit from a passive laning phase the most. They're going to get their CS, they're going to go farm the jungle, they're going to get really fat, and they're going to win the game, right? Shadow Fiend benefits a lot from the laning phase. He gets his souls, and if he gets full souls really early, it kind of just snowballs this lane in a way where, like, you can't come back to this lane. Because there's going to be some level 5 SF, you're going to be level 4, he's going to threaten you with raises constantly, he's going to be denying and CSing every single creep, and it just gets like really, really hard. And so the way that you deal with this is you take these small advantages like you have, like you're level 3 and he's level 2, and you go and you just click the absolute living shit out of him. And you click him so few times. Like the only time you ever even think about clicking him is to draw aggro. And you want to draw aggro and do something with it. Like you draw aggro and then you kind of run away. And you go to CS. So I would say you're playing a better Shadow Fiend right now than you are Clinkz, where you're just kind of like trying to safely play this lane. And he's also playing Shadow Fiend, but you're not punishing him at all. Another thing to consider with every single lane is you want to keep track of how much regen they have and how much regen you have. So he has only a tango, a shared tango, and a stick. So theoretically he has 32 seconds of 7 HP regen, whereas you have 2 sticks, 2 tangos, and a salve. And so you should be forcing this guy to use his regen with the threat of, if we're just trading regen, like if you hit me and I hit you and then we both back up and regen, who does this favor in the long run, right? I think it's pretty obvious that it favors the person with the most regen. And so right now, since you have already purchased this regen, the fact that you haven't used any of it in 3 minutes means you're being way too passive. Like, you should never be full HP and mana on any lane ever, because you should be using it. You don't have to commit. Like, you don't have to walk up and take some awful trade and take 300 damage. And then back up and salve. Like, you want to take even trades, but you want to force these even trades and use your regen advantage to turn the next trade into an unfavorable trade for him, because he can't regen at the end of it. This is one of the reasons why safe lane is better for safe laners than it is for off laners, because the pause 5 can make these trades, can go to base or die, and bring regen to the carry. And so this carry just has so much more regen, so he can take worse trades versus offlaners that are generally like tankier, stronger, have more damage. And it favors them because they're getting last hits because of this regen, and then the pause 5 is just like pumping them full of regen constantly. So you go ahead and get double Wraith. I think that's fine. I would like to see you get raindrops and or a stick as well. And it takes you a long time to send out these Wraith bands. Like, you actually wait until you have both of them before you send your courier. And you should have just sent the one as soon as you had it, and then when you had the second one, sent it out as well. And all of this is, like, the means to the end is you have these additional stats to get last hits to either increase your farm and get more items, or you have these additional stats and damage so you can zone this SF out of the lane and make sure he gets nothing. So if we look at the last hits and denies here, you two are both leading, but you should be, even if your number isn't higher, his number should be lower. Like, even if you have more last hits here than him, let's say you have 16 and he has 15, right? Like, he shouldn't have 15 last hits. You should have bullied them out of this lane. You should have forced him to salve. You should force him to bottling. And here, now that I'm looking at the time, you should also be thinking about runes. So you know he has a bottle. You know he's going to look to go get a rune in order to refill his mana and HP. So a mistake that he makes is he's not trading with you now because he has this bottle and the salve, and hopefully runes coming up. And then he also wants you to be preoccupied with this wave while he's getting the rune. So if he shoves this lane under tower, or shoves the wave under tower, then you're going to be behind your tower, back here, and you're going to be CSing while he walks and scouts and looks for a rune. Now he has a ward vision of this bottom one, as do you, which means he can just kind of posture a little bit towards top, and then he'll have the information of if he needs to sprint bottom or if he can continue to walk top where he's postured. And you should be dealing with this, but he's not taking advantage of his wave shoving mechanics, and you're not even trying to shove the lane. So you're just kind of here. You're both just casually CSing. And I happen to know what rune spawns here, and it's kind of catastrophic to your lane, because he bottles up, he's full HP mana, any trades that he would have made, and then he gets this DD. And all of a sudden, like, the fact that you don't have a stick, that you don't have raindrops, like, turns these trades really, really hard. You finally use your salve at 4 minutes and 30 seconds, but I have to assume that if you had used it earlier because you were forcing him out of the lane, he wouldn't have level 5, and he wouldn't be able to zone you as hard, and he wouldn't have been able to get that DD because he would be scared of going for it, because he would be low HP. Another thing I wanted to mention is your use of strafe. So if you can deal with the raises, then strafe basically allows you to evade any other damage type in this lane, right? The creeps aren't really going to hurt you that much. You've got good armor. When you hit 6, you can regen pretty well off of your ult. But you're not using strafe to dodge these autos, and you're not using strafe to give you additional attack speed to trade with him. And that's something to consider. So this is a pretty general overview of the lane. I'm going to back up because I have one other pretty specific point that I want to talk about, but it's a little bit more general than just this game. And it applies to basically every single mid matchup where there's a nuke. So I want to talk to you about range creeps and nukes to secure them. So every single range creep where you are a hero with a nuke. So we can look at heroes like Storm Spirit, like Tinker, like Odie, Shadow Fiend, Bloodseeker, Medusa, Meepo, PA, all of the Lina, Dragonite. There's all these heroes that have some kind of ranged nuke, even Zeus. And they can use that nuke to secure the ranged creep CS. And that's generally how they're going to be nuking in the lane. Now, if I were to ask you if you could get a last hit and damage the enemy hero with your nuke at the same time, if it would be worth it, and you would probably say yes, especially if it's a range creep, right? And so what you want to do as a smart mid player is you want to force the enemy hero to use his nuke for every range creep. So you basically say you're not going to get this last hit unless you use your nuke, and then you don't want to allow him to hit you with the nuke. So for Shadow Fiend, it's raises. And so whenever he comes up for a range creep, like, you should just be sitting here autoing him this entire time. Like, you could have autoed him 5 times here and forced him to use raise. And instead, he doesn't get to use raise. He even animates it and realizes he doesn't have to. And he should have been forced to. And there's another 1 or 2 points in this lane as well. It's always around the range creeps. It's like, again, you know he wants it, so force him to use a nuke for it. I think this one here... Nope. One of these is the perfect example. I should have made a timestamp. Here we go. Yep, this is it. Alright. This is a hard range creep for him to get, right? It's unreliable for him to be able to hit high ground because of the mischance. So he goes ahead and raises for these creeps. That's fine. And you know he wants it, right? Like, you know he freaking wants this range creep. Look at how juicy it is. Look at the way he's walking. Look at the way he's posturing. And look at the way he's played the other, 6 waves or something. So you should not have backed here. Like, this is a little bit of a pussy move. You should be right here on these stairs, like on the bottom right corner of the stairs where I'm circling with my mouse. And you should be hitting him like crazy. And you actually do. And you go up and you walk. And then you make this mistake and you walk into the nuke, right? Instead of chasing him and making him, like, and getting 2 or 3 more autos off, you do this. And this, like, exact moment right here is what shows me the difference between, like, a good mid player and a great mid player. And this is like a good mid player move. Like, you had most of the right idea and you didn't commit to it. You were unsure. And making sure that, like, that can't happen again. Is really what I'm trying to get at. Like, if you want to climb ranks and you want to be good, this kind of play can't happen again. It's way too free. Like, it's just free harass. You gotta sit there and hit him, and you choose not to. So, okay, we're gonna skip out of the laning phase now because we've already watched this. Okay, so let's talk about rotations. So Clinkz is a hero that does tend to rotate. Rotation should always be with some form of power spike. So let's say you get a DD rune and you go and rotate with it. Sorry, there's a lawnmower going on. I'm not sure if you can hear it. Let's say you get a haste rune or something like that, right? So you want to be thinking to yourself, what heroes can I threaten on the map? How do I rotate? Is it worth rotating? These kinds of questions should be popping up in your head. So Clinkz has a pretty large power spec with his 6. We've already gone through 1 level 6 like ult cycle. It's about to be off cooldown now. And you should be looking for how to use this spike in order to get something off the map. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you go and you gank someone. It can. Maybe it just means that you farm faster and more efficiently. So, so we'll just watch to see when and if you rotate or how you're farming. And we'll talk about what you do here. So you definitely do want to consider your tower here. So you are doing good at defending your tower. But I tend to see that, like, you're not really hitting any creeps outside of these lane creeps, and you're not even getting all of these CS. So you should be shoving the lane constantly. You see how SF walks up and he just autos like crazy, and then he walks off and he does something? That's why he has 50 CS here and you have 36, right? It's not just because he has better CS in the lane. It's also because he's shoving the lane now that he has some kind of farming ability. And again, he's going to walk up, he's going to shove the lane, and you're going to kind of let him, and then you're going to defend the tower. And defending the tower is good, but you can just be auto-attacking this lane. Like, you can go now with this wave here. It's like, and he'll do his thing, and then you just sit here and auto the creeps. Like, you don't have to drag him back to your tower, you can just sit there and auto him. And he's going to walk up, and he's going to farm this camp. And you guys end up getting a great kill on him. Really, really good rotation by Spirit Breaker. But I'm attributing that kill to Spirit Breaker making a good play, and not really any other factor. So, like, SF kind of made a mistake. He walked in the river. You happened to be there. You did damage. But for the most part, like, Spirit Breaker was just in the right place at the right time. And this is, like, the first time you actually come up and shove the wave. And it's good to do this with a catapult. And then here, I think, is where it goes south. So you have two options here, right? Like, there's a catapult hitting this tower. You can pressure this tower. Excuse me, I'm going to try to get this lawnmower to shut up. So you can pressure this tower with your autos, which is something that Clinkz does really, really well because of his W and his strafe. You can go farm and you can go rotate. And you need to decide which is the most worth in this game. I think, personally, that you should be hitting this tower and not rotating to this fight that's going on top. And I'll tell you why I think going to this fight top is bad. First of all, this dude is already dead, right? Like, A is already dead. There's no way that he is getting out of this situation. And he dies, like, yeah, I didn't even know that Snapfire was it. Like, he dies instantly. These two heroes are probably the hardest heroes in the game for you to kill. Like, they're both super tanky. They have nukes. They have stuns. Slaughter has his ult for you, right? Like, you want to be as far away from this combination of heroes as possible. This is where we talked about in the draft phase, where, like, picking Clinkz into Slaughter is fine as long as you play around it. And running to the Slaughter is not how you play around it. The way that you play around it is you force the Slaughter to do something, and then you run somewhere else. So here, you do get a kill, which is nice, but I just don't think that the amount of gold and the amount of map control that you got from this kill is worth more than the damage that you would have done to this mid tower. So the mid tower didn't really take all that much damage from the siege creep, and it would not have fallen. Like, you have to understand, I completely understand that this would not have fallen, but you could push this tower, and then you could go and take this small camp away from SF, or this medium camp away from SF, and then you can farm back, and then when he shoves the wave, you're here to defend your tower. And that is a better, like, rotation, in quotes, than what you did top. It increases your net worth quite a bit more, and it puts some pressure on the map, and it decreases the amount of farm that Shadowfiend gets. In terms of itemization, I think Orchid is definitely the best item for you this game. And I tend to find on Clinkz that, excuse me, that your first item power spike is when you have the best chance to take over the game, like, as a hero. And so focusing on yourself, and even if your teammates are pinging you like, hey, come top, come gank top, or whatever, right? And making sure you focus on yourself and whatever is the best use of your time is inevitably what's going to win you the most games. It's not rotating top to go and get an assist on some support pudge. It's making sure that your mid tower never falls, that the enemy constantly is pressured on their mid tower, and that you're getting farm. So you live there. This isn't as close as if you have raindrops and a wand, which I've already mentioned before that I think you should have. And I just feel like you're... No, that sucks. That's unfortunate. I feel like what I was saying is you're not... Like, you're just... you haven't made this transition from the laning phase to, like, the mid-game very smoothly. So you're still laning, like, you're level 1 or 2, and you're trying to get these CS and have good equilibrium, and you don't give a rat's ass about equilibrium. Like, you want the equilibrium as far on the enemy's side as possible. When it's early game, you want the equilibrium on your side, because this tower will protect you, or this tower will protect you, right? And now that it's not the laning phase, like, that equilibrium desire changes. Like, you want your creeps on their side of the map. In every lane, in every single lane, past, we'll say 10 minutes. So, past 10 minutes, you don't want the creeps on your side of the map. Okay, so you've got your Orchid here pretty soon. I would like to see you wait for your ult to come off cooldown and then make a play. And you get a really nice pick off there. You recognize that you don't actually need your ult to kill that guy, you just need to get melee range on him, so that's really good. Again, a really good pick. This is good, and this is what I talk about. Like, this first item, Power Spike on Clinkz, is really, really strong. And so, you got your Orchid. Let's see. You got your Orchid in your inventory at 17 minutes. And I think you can get your Orchid in your inventory at 15 minutes if you play for yourself a little bit more. And that 2 minute difference, that 2 minute difference makes an enormous impact on how fast you get your Deso, your BKB, your next items, right? And that changes the game for the enemy team as well, right? So you have this Orchid, and Jug is like, okay, I can't really play until I have Manta. Now, he's got Manta already, so you're not going to be going on this Jug. The, like, Pudge, the Shadow Fiend, like, they need defensive items for this. And so the fact that your timing comes out a little bit after they have their defensive items already for your Orchid makes it a little bit scary for you, right? So it's like, Jug had a 15-minute Manta, and if you had, like, a 14 or 15-minute... And Jug got fed this game, to be honest. Like, this is a pretty atypical timing for someone in this bracket. So... Like, but if you get this Orchid at 14, 15 minutes because you just play for CS more and you play to shove the enemy out of your lane and just, like, focus on your own farm, then maybe you get to kill the Jug once before he has Manta. And that's, like, a huge deal. Like, maybe he gets his Manta, you know, at 60 minutes or something, right? That doesn't sound like a big deal, but that 1 minute timing means that he can't play those lanes the same way, which means it slows down this item by quite a bit. And it slows down, you know, his Ags and his Nullifier and his Deso and all these other items. Like, his timing gets completely cut just because you were a tiny bit faster than him. So you are leading your team on CS, which is absolutely ridiculous to me. Like, this is a complete joke that this guy has the CS that he has. I'm not gonna make excuses for you based off of your team. But, like, your team isn't performing, which just means you have to perform better. So, like, this game, I think if I was playing Clinkz, I could have dominated just because I would be faster on my timing and cleaner with, like, some early game rotations. And playing the lane, like, if you bully this... I know I'm talking over a fight. But if you bully this SF a lot, like, he doesn't get his Yules and his Blink this quickly. And this, like, basically means that the enemy has these 2 power spikes. Like, they're carrying their mid. You can't solo kill at any point this game. Which is not great. You can kill the other heroes, but if the carry in the mid is there, you kind of have to leave the area. So, and as a Clinkz, you don't want to be, or as any hero, you don't want to be in that situation where, like, you're a pause 1 or pause 2, and you can never kill the enemy pause 1 or pause 2 by yourself. So, we can talk about this fight a little bit. So the enemy shows up with numbers, which makes it fight hard. Your void isn't there. I think the only thing I would say about that is just make sure you have good vision and be careful on who you go on there. But for the most part, like I think the idea of that fight is fine. The dangerous aspect of it is they still have their tier 1, so they can't TP. But the enemy team is just ahead of you. Like I don't think that fight was bad. I think you guys are just behind. That's like my takeaway from that fight. Fabulous. Okay, so you go itemization. So you go Orca this game, which I think is the best item you could go, and then you go Deso. Something that these items are not allowing you to do is play the map without fear. So you can't ever really like solo push these towers, which is something that Clinkz wants to do because he does it really well. And you can't do this because of the items that you have. So you don't have a stick that gives you survivability. You don't have a way of dispelling like Dust or Slardar's ult. You don't have a BKB to like dodge the Yule's combo from SF. And so what you need to have, or what you need to be thinking about in this game, is how can I accomplish this goal, like taking tier 1s, without feeding? Or if I'm going to feed, how does it take multiple heroes to kill me? Like I need to force 3 heroes to die pushing this tier 1 for it to be even considerable. Like one route, one thought process is you get this Deso and you do it faster than they can react, and that's an idea. The other thing is like you can go a defensive item on Clinkz. Like you can go a Hurricane Pike and like be able to pike yourself out of danger if they go on you and run away with your super fast MS. Another thing you could do is you could go Manta. I know it sounds kind of weird for Clinkz to go Manta, but it's not that bad this game. And like you get a lot of benefit from the stats, from the agi and the move speed. Synergizes really, really well with your percentage-based move speed here. And that lets you deal with the Slardar a lot better, right? Like if he goes on you and he dusts you or he ults you or whatever, like you can just Manta, invis, and run away. And what you should be looking for is you're trying to get these towers, but you're not trying to get them at any cost, right? Like your goal is you want to take this tower, or you want enemies to be forced to rotate to this tower to deal with you. And what that's going to do is it's going to give you vision of enemy heroes, and that allows your other cores like Faceless Void to play less scared. Like this dude's just feeding, he's going a terrible item build. But if he's not feeding because there's no enemy heroes on his side of the map, then maybe his trash item build works out for you. The other thing is if they don't react, then you're going to get these tier 1 towers, and that wave equilibrium that we talked about, like your creeps are going to be farther on their side of the map, and that forces the enemy to do stuff. Like this game is all about forcing the enemy to do stuff, and I don't see you forcing them to do hardly anything. And you should be itemizing and playing in a way to where you're forcing them to do stuff at minimal cost. So we'll just keep watching. There's not a huge amount of purpose to watch the game past then. Like, the enemy team should be ending, they're just bad, so... But I'm curious to see what plays you make when you get your Deso. So it looks like you guys going for a play. And this is really good. Like, you recognize that you have this power spike, and you immediately go and do something. So that's really good. Those kinds of plays with your cameras looking bottom, checking what Slardar has, those are also really good plays. You should be doing more of them. I think an item you could have considered this game was Aghanims. So I haven't played a lot of Ags Clinkz recently. I used to play Clinkz quite a bit back before they changed his ult back, and then right after when it was super broken. So, but the Ags, this game seems kind of nice because it's sort of hard for you to commit to these full 5v5 team fights and you're behind. And you do a lot of damage. But you need to be able to do damage without just standing there holding still. And I think the Aghanims allows you to do that, plus the like double skeleton walk, exit, summons burning skeleton thing. That's going to allow you to pick off some of these heroes. And then the other thing you can be thinking about is in every one of these fights, you should be running around to the back and trying to kill some random squishy idiot who can't deal with you. So like you should be looking for this Snapfire, you should be looking for this Pudge. Like they have no way of dealing with you whatsoever. Like their team has to completely turn and run at you. And if they do that, you invis and walk away. But like then you forced 4 heroes to deal with you instead of like you're on one side of the fight, kind of walking through this wall of heroes that you can't deal with to get to someone that you can kill quickly. So in this game, like you're playing from behind at this point, but of course, yeah, there we go. And that's what I'm talking about. Like you should be forcing to do this kind of stuff. They don't defend, they lose a tower. If they defend, you walk away and you force them to defend. And this Spearbreaker Clinkz combo is really nice, so they give you vision, so if they try to juke in the trees. And I'd like to see you try to sneak this mid tower. Like as soon as you have vision of people in other waves, you know that you at least have 3 seconds to hit the tower. Almost legendary Kronos' entire team. So it's like, it's fine that you're not at this fight, but I think you need to look at this fight, and you were top, we can back up and look. Yeah, so you're running top here. So yeah, so you're in this area, okay? And you see this fight going on, and it's a complete freaking disaster. Like, and it's a disaster going in. Like, at no point is it good. Like, somebody gets hooked, right? And you guys are so far behind that you shouldn't be going into this. They can TP to this tower. Like, the fact that Spearpreaker goes in is just crazy. Like, let the freaking Pit Lord die. That's part of his job. And instead, here comes the Chrono of a lifetime. He comes in. He Chronos 3 of his teammates next to the entire enemy team. And you are still running at this thinking, I need to be there. I need to help my team. I don't want to get pinged or something, or I don't know what your mental thought process is. But instead, you should be thinking, oh my gosh, how do we mitigate this damage? And your teammates should have been thinking, like Void and Spearpicker should be thinking the same thing. How do we mitigate this damage? Not how do we turn this fight, how do we mitigate the damage? And the answer is going to be split pushing in this case. So, like, Void can just beeline bottom, or Spearbreaker can just charge bottom and start pushing out that lane. Like, you can run top, and you can take this tier 1 for free. You can wait for them to rotate top, and then you can go and take this tier 1 mid for free, right? And all of a sudden, what's happened from this Pit Lord getting hooked is he fed, you guys got 2 towers, and you got a couple waves. And that is damage mitigation. That sounds way better than Chrono getting used, Spearbreaker going in, and then you kind of, like, running towards the fight, and then running in a circle here. It's like, and you end up going to base, and you're kind of like in this weird limbo here, and you need to recognize that there's nothing you can do in this situation. Like, there is not a single player in the world with this kind of, there's just not a freaking, if God was a Dota player, he could not turn this situation right here from them getting racks. And so again, what should you be thinking? How do I mitigate the damage? How do I do as much damage to them in trade for this damage? And you should be bottom, you should be top, you should be mid. Like, tier 1 towers don't have backdoor protection. Tier 2 does. Backdoor protection. No backdoor protection. So, like, just go take these towers. Take 2 towers. Even if they glyph twice, whatever. Who cares? Like, go push this wave into their tier 2 and force them to TP back. But instead, you are kind of like in the area, giving, and I'm going to say, I don't know for sure that you're doing this for your team's benefit, but I tend to find that most people are. It's like, you're kind of here giving moral support, like, oh, I didn't abandon you guys. I'm not just AFK farming the map. Like, I'm here defending, in air quotes. Whereas, I would rather that you just mute your entire team if they're pinging you for being an idiot. And I'm not saying you're an idiot, but they're just trying to call you an idiot because they're mad. And go and do something that you know is right. Like, go freaking push these towers. And if they're pinging you saying you need to defend, like, just mute them. Like, they're morons. It's like, if they weren't morons, they would not have made this play mid. There's no way that you go and Chrono 2 of your teammates next to a Snapfire and next to a Shadow Fiend on a fight when you're 25k net worth behind. Like, that's just absolute lunacy. even here, like, you have so many opportunities to take this mid tower and you never do, and it just, like, kind of ruins the equilibrium of the game. Way too much running around. So I think I'm going to end this here. I don't want to just keep ranting about the same thing. But I find that your laning phase, on Clinkz especially, is way too passive. You're not taking advantage of your W. And outside of the laning phase, like, your rotations to get kills are probably the best thing you do. And about everything else seems to be a little bit of confusion. Like, you're not entirely sure what you should be doing. And some of this is definitely because of the state of the game, right? Like, you don't have all of the vision and information that I have now. But what you do know is that you push towers really damn fast, and that you would rather get towers than feed. And showing up to these, like, crappy fights is going to cause you to feed. Like, staying base here accomplished literally nothing. Like, you sat in invis by this tier 3 tower and did nothing, and you could have farmed 2 waves, you could have pushed a tower or something. And that's inevitably what's going to let you win these, I'm going to call, like, 1v5 games, where you are basically the only one on your team that isn't throwing the game. Isn't actively throwing the game, but you're not doing anything to take advantage of, like, their throws. Like, if they're throwing the game and they're going and feeding and people are running them down, go and do something on the other side of the map. Cause the enemy team to have to care about you. And I think I will end this video here and begin uploading.